So sometimes at this stage we can pre-cache our volume sources, but in my case we can see that it's calculating pretty fast, so we can use this density directly to add a dope network. So let's add a dope network. Let's call this vertex syn. Let's dive inside, and for this simulation I'm going to use the new sparse system in Houdini 18. So let's go to the pyro-sparse, the smoke sparse, smoke object sparse, yeah, and my volume source, which I connect to the third input. And let's grab my op input path. So we can choose between the sub, we can choose our fast contact geometry, but I prefer the old school thing. So it should be the same node. So with those sign, I can say that I use the input path from this node, which I'm inside of my dynamic, so I use the vertex sim node. And I choose my first input, which is 0. And I will connect my density from this field, from this source. Okay, so I choose source. I can leave the source mode. So make a plus. It's going to be a scalar, like take density, do the density, and add another one field, which is vector, is our v, which I will transfer to field val. Okay, I will change my operation to pull. By default, let's leave it scale 1. I think we will change this later. So go to smoke object and let's play with that. Since somewhere here we should have a smoke simulation. Yeah. Here's my vertex start. And what I should have is the light, because we can see the shadow. It's very important to have the shadows. So go to object and go to the skylight, press Ctrl. I will remove skylight from viewport, but I still gonna see the shadows. But in this level, when I'm inside of the geometry and then go inside of the dope network, I can see the shadow in that level. So we can go and use the dope import fields, grab my dope network from here and use the any smoke object you can find there. Choose smoke and don't have a rest, don't have a temperature, and don't have a color, just a smoke. And my camera, here we go. Here's my vertex, looking interesting. So I'm gonna disable this template and enable just flat shaded, don't need those squares. So maybe just the first change I want to set up here is maybe a little bit bigger velocity, maybe like 3. Add it here, let's see, let's play it. It will rise up very quickly, I think. And we have rotation. I just want to see, I guess that my voxel size is a little bit too big. I mean, too small for a moment. Yeah, let's say, I know, 0.3 in the case. And I don't need too many details for now, just want to see a dynamic. Now it's working pretty much faster. Let's go to camera again. Go to cam, we have a hard shadows, but it's looking pretty good. We have rotation. You can see those mushrooms, small mushrooms here. I think we can avoid them. So yeah, a little bit noisy, but anyway, let's go to DOP network and try to fix some stuff. And go to particle solver, go to the shape. Well, I have a dissipation 0.5, which is good. I want to remove any smoke which is bigger than our, I don't want to remove all small density smokes. And increase the time scale like 0.5. I would choose that all those parameters, which will be cool if I have a temperature, but I don't have a temperature. So viscosity, don't need to use this. Flames, I don't have flames. So another thing I want to add here in my shape is using disturbance. So with disturbance is important to break my shape a little bit. So add a turbulence, a big turbulence like 2. So with disturbance, I can increase this cutoff, I think, a little bit to 0.1. And the block size a little bit bigger because I have a very big scale simulation. All these guys, I think I will leave them. Don't need a shading. And with the turbulence, there is something that you can see that we have an influence field and the temperature. So I don't have a temperature. You can see here. Oh, let me just create a few frame simulation to see how many fields I have. So I have an active field, which is show me the active area, active volume for simulation, the pressure, velocity, density, and that's all. I don't have a temperature because there is no temperature inside of my source. So let's call this smoke source. And so if I add a turbulence, there is no influence from this turbulence because it will be applied to the temperature. So we have a controlled field from density. So our density is just a control field, but influence field is the temperature. It's important to know. So let's change this to velocity. I want to have influence on velocity, base it on the density field. All right. So this wheel size just a little bit bigger. And maybe increase the grain again just a little bit more, and some level, maybe 3. Cool. And yeah, the final thing I want to add here is some substeps. I have a very big speed for my particles, so it definitely should be good to have a little bit more accurate result for my calculation. So I added substeps like 3, maybe even more in final sim, but I guess for my preview result should be fine. And it's a little bit dense, so let's go to the DOP network and maybe let's choose like 0.7, so just a little bit smaller value here, a little bit smaller. And it still has too many noise. So what I can do, let me just remove point velocity at the moment. And what else I can do, if you go here in the particles out, let me check my velocities. They a little bit crazy. So what we can do is, well, we can try to recalculate those velocities using the trail sub. So if I add a trail here after the time shift, and I want to choose the compute velocity. But in this case, what I'm not include here, which is more important, is the IDs. So if I want to create a proper velocity, I need to have my IDs, which I removed with the attribute delete. So I will set the ID. Oops. Come on. There the IDs. Where you are. And again, Control S. Save to disk on background. Because you can see that my velocity is not properly calculated, and I should use the match by attribute, and I want to use the ID attribute, so it should be there. So velocity, age, color, and ID. That's what I can use here. Okay. So it doesn't take too many time again. Can clear completed jobs. So now I guess that I already have. So it's my, yeah. So now with my particles here on the trail, I can enable match by ID. And I guess I should have my IDs, show all attributes, and maybe reload. Yeah, so now I have my IDs. And now we have proper velocity. So basically, this velocity for my particles calculating based on the particle movement. The velocities I had here, they go from the dot network. But now you can see the difference. That was my velocities. Now you can see that some particles have a very strange direction from the velocities. All right, so now we correct them a little bit, and we will use them inside of my DOP network. Let's uncheck this, choose camera, and let's play the sim again. Make a pause just to avoid too many time for calculation. And I just want another thing to do. I want to disable my turbulence for a moment. I want to see just a difference between, let's turn this off, leave just 0.5 here. Turn the thing off. Okay. Again. I just want to see what result we're gonna have just with the basic velocity from my particles, without additional point velocity from this node and without additional turbulence from the DOP network. And we still have a good start, but then too many velocities. So let's remove this again to maybe like 1 and decrease the density a little bit. But even with this setup, I think that here in the bottom area we have more density than I want to. The thing is, we have the bigger particle density in this area, because if we have the same particle amount here and here, but in this area we have a big radius, and the density of our particles per one unit of square is less than here. So what I can do is try to, I can use even this, yeah. Try to create a variable for my density, and maybe even with a p-scale. So when we use the volume and stress attributes, we have the particle scale is 2 for all my particles. Let's remove velocity for a moment. And yeah, you can see now that we can increase the particle scale like to 3. Maybe it will create a little bit better result, and decrease the voxel scale to 0.3. I need to have a very, very high quality source, because even with this sim, I will use like voxel is 1.5, something like that. So what I can do using this attribute bundle, the first thing I want to change the p-scale. So let's type a p-scale. I want to add a little bit of random. So I will multiply my p-scale by some random value, and I'm going to use the point number. So add p to num. But now my p scale will be just from 0 to 1. If we go and look on the p scale, the lower setting is 0, the bigger is 0.2, which is pretty small here. So I want to fit this range, fit 0, 1, and now I will set the minimum and the maximum range for the p scale. Take some time for calculate something. So, and the minimum should be like, I don't know, maybe 0.75, and the bigger, like 0.25, I guess it should be fine. So now you can see that we have this smaller value is 0.15 to 0.25 because we use a multiplication. So it was 0.2, and now we have 0.25, 0.15, like 0.05 plus and minus. So it's a little bit of a difference. And another thing I want to add here is some density difference using the age. So I want to add less density here and more density there. So how I can do this? Let's add some float attribute, I don't know, like a test. You can add any name you want. And it's going to be an age divided by, I don't know, maybe like 9 seconds. All right. To see the influence of this test attribute, we can go and type cd equal test. And now we can see that we have a gray area here and bright area there. So depending on this value in seconds, we can define which area I want to apply this color. So using this age test or color test, you can find which area will be under influence of this attribute triangle. So my float density attribute should be multiplied by this, multiplied by this test attribute. Okay, so now I had density, so the smaller one is 0.5 as you remember, and the maximum is 2 because we add the attribute noise. But now when I multiply this by the test, where we have the areas even with minus, I don't like to use the minus, and the upper one is 2 again. But we can use the ABS. I don't want to use negative values. But another thing I want to add here is a fit. So again, fit 1. I want to change the range for my test. So it's not the range, actually, I want to set the minimum and the maximum value from the test. So as you remember, when I apply the test to the color, my bottom area had the darker color. It means that if I apply, let's say 0.5 value, I will multiply my density by 0.5 in the bottom areas. It means that they will be 2 times less dense. And I multiply by 2 the upper areas. And that means that in those areas, the density will be twice bigger. So again, if we go back to our attributes, and now we have the lower density is 0.25, except of the 5 in the bottom areas, and the bigger density we have in the top areas, which is closer to 4. All right. So that's gonna be p scale and density. All right, so volume raster attributes, so particles, let's increase even 4, maybe even bigger particle scale. All right, And another thing I want to choose here is I want to enable velocity blur. So what is mean velocity blur? It will create a density volume using the direction for each voxel from the velocities and at the velocity. Yeah. Don't forget to back velocity, because I'm gonna need this velocity for my DOP network simulation. All right, so let's back here into DOP field, DOP import field. Let's see, what do we have now? And that's what we have. Now it's more interesting. Just to wait a little bit to create a nice shape. So I decrease the particle scale to 1.2 because, well, the 4 was too blurry. I'll lose many details from those noisy stuff. So I will decrease to 1.2. And now I will decrease the voxel size to 0.15 and calculate our simulation. Let me just double check this. Yeah, yes, all that's fine. And really I don't need to add any turbulence and disturbance for this kind of simulation, because as we see from the background, you can see that sometimes we have a very smooth works, very smooth sides, like a blurry. So I don't want to add too many turbulence. In the next scene, in the next tornado type, I will cover some stuff, how we can add some noise in different stages. So we'll add a point velocity. We will add the noise to our vortex tool in the DOP network, in a POP network actually. But before we do this, I want to pre-cache this theme. So I'll go to the file cache and let's call this, and now smooth vortex 01. Okay, and I will save this and add a null object. Oops, null object to finalize this tree, and that's going to be my S smooth V out, smooth vortex out. So let's say I don't need to save 500 frames. I get that like 100 will be more than enough in this case. So let's save it, just delete this and maybe use F4 for byte numbering. I prefer to use F4 to have 4 digits in a number. Okay, so we save it and save project and save the file cache.